Our breath is the only autonomic function of the body that we can consciously control. Breath is the access to our emotions. You're training your nervous system to allow more surrender, to allow more trust. There's a hierarchy to our sympathetic response. Fight, flight, freeze. Going to the root cause is not like I'm going to unpack everything in one go and then be healed. That's not how healing works. To let the breath guide you and to feel these things, because the more you can feel life, the more you can welcome life.
Ever feel like there's untapped power within you just waiting to be unleashed? What if I told you that power lies within your breath? Today on the Upward Spiral podcast, we're unlocking the secrets of breathwork with Dr. Marylene Henry, a doctor of osteopathy, breathwork facilitator, and holistic healing expert. She's also a yoga teacher, Reiki healer, and mindfulness coach with a deep understanding of the mind-body connection. Marylene has helped countless people transform their lives through the power of breath, and today she's here to share her wisdom with you. So if you're new here, this is the Upward Spiral podcast, where we explore how to create and maintain positive momentum in your life. So get ready to discover how to breathe your way to a better life as we explore the science and the benefits of practical techniques of breathwork that can help you manage stress, improve focus, and unlock your full potential. Marylene, welcome to the Upward Spiral podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
I am so excited you are here. I feel very cool because we've worked together a couple of times now, and I'm like, whenever I talk to people about you, I'm like, oh, my favorite breathwork teacher is coming up from Bali. It's like, I don't know if I sound ridiculous or not, but I'm like, I love it when you're up here, and I'm so grateful that you've agreed to talk to me today.
Thank you. Yeah, it's always such a celebration for me to come to Singapore and share breathwork in spaces that I can relate to and I feel good at, and where I feel that more awareness of the breath is so needed.
Yeah, I was about to say places where it's needed the most.
Yeah.
So look, I think breathwork might be quite new to a lot of my listeners. So I think my first question is, can you explain in really simple terms what breathwork is?
I can, and at the same time, it's very complicated, right? Because breathwork is a very trendy word. Now everything is called breathwork. So we call breathwork anything that works with the breath, anything that will get you to control your breath or use your breath to reach altered states. So breathwork is really this really, really big umbrella of modalities that work with the breath. So it's just to use the breath for purpose, whether this purpose is regulation or building better performance or changing your physiology. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, amazing. So, okay, maybe let's break this down a little bit. Because, I honestly, when I think of breath work, I think of going straight to the altered states. Maybe let's start a little bit lighter. Like, what could breath work look like on an everyday thing, on a daily basis?
So breathwork on an everyday basis is as simple as breath awareness, right? People can just take a moment and become aware of our breath, because our breath is the only autonomic function of the body that we can consciously control. So just by becoming aware of our breath, we can shift all of our other autonomic function, because that's the entry gate to basically our autonomic nervous system. So just becoming aware of your breath and noticing, like, how am I breathing just for a minute is already breath work, because just breath awareness will regulate your breath. And then we can go into more what I call mind-based techniques, right? Which the yogis have used as pranayama. And we find these techniques in basically all ancient cultures, where we use certain breath ratios, we use certain breath positioning in the chest or in the belly, or breathing through the mouth or through the nose. And this is the more popular breath work, I would say, in like until maybe 10, 20 years ago. That was the only type of breath work that we would see. And it's about, controlling the breath. So there's very simple techniques that people can use when they wake up in the morning that will help them bring more focus to their day. For example, box breathing is a very simple one, where you inhale, hold, exhale, and hold for equal amounts of time. And yeah, that just brings regulation. And there's thousands of different ways we can work with the breath like this. And then there's the more body-based, more somatic way of working with the breath, with circular breathing, which has become a lot more popular, I would say, in the last couple of decades, which is the altered state, right? Where we actually use the breath to create almost like a psychedelic-like experience where it allows us to tap into the more subconscious and unconscious part of our brain and explore what's in there and what is potentially preventing us from living at our full potential, living at our full expansiveness and at our full capacity. So you see that the breath is so complex and so vast, and it's really exciting to have all of these access gates based on what we need.
Yeah. Okay, I love this. And I want to actually go through each of them one by one. So the first, I'd love to understand a little bit about, did you say the autonomic nervous system? Autonomic nervous system. So could you please just explain to me what that is? Let's start with the basic.
Let's start with our basic, right? So when we look at the nervous system, there's a conscious nervous system that we call the somatic one, right? That's the part of our nervous system that will take in sensory impulse, like the light, the colors that we see, the sensations on your skin, the smell. We'll analyze it in your central nervous system, and then we'll generate a response. So everything that we do consciously, and when I say consciously, sometimes it's not even fully conscious, right? When we walk, we don't think about putting one foot, but it's a conscious nervous system that makes us move, that makes us act. So that's what we call the somatic nervous system. It's the part of our brain that we control. And the other aspect of our brain, the autonomic one, is completely autonomous. It completely functions just on feedback loops according to our internal environment to self-regulate. And that nervous system is either helping the body repair and regenerate and heal, or mobilizing our resources for our survival. And that's the fight or flight, or rest and digest, or sympathetic, parasympathetic that you may have heard of. So that's what we call the autonomic nervous system. This is all the self-regulating functions of the body, like your hormonal function, your blood pressure, your heart rate, your respiratory rate, your electrolyte levels, and how much water your kidneys will filter out. All of that is self-regulating. And it changed based on your perception of, am I safe? Or am I in danger? If I am in danger, this nervous system will direct all of your resources for your survival. So that's the fight or flight response, right? So it will shut down your digestion. It will shut down a lot of things that are not essential and direct all of your resources to your muscles, to your heart to pump it, increase your cortisol, increase the adrenaline, because there's a threat and we need to survive. And when we're in safety, that's the opposite. Now we start absorbing nutrients, transforming them into the building blocks of the body. So that's the rest and digest one.
And so how can breath help support our, I can't say it, autonomic. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
I can't get my words out today. System. So I like, maybe let's give some examples. So I wake up in the morning and, I'm feeling good. I jump out of bed and I'm feeling good, high energy. I wanna get the best out of my day. Mm-hmm. What might be a good quick breathing exercise to just enhance that? To
enhance just feeling good and have a lot of energy, I would then go into more of kind of what we call three-part breath. Three-part breath is to use your full breath capacity, right? Imagining that you're pouring the breath into the body from the pelvic floor all the way up to the collarbone. And this way, you kind of explore all the different parts of our breath, and all different parts of our breath has a connection to different parts of our nervous system. So in three-part breath, you would breathe in the belly, and then the breath rise to the lower ribs and then to the chest, and exhale in reverse. that is full use of your lung capacity and also very calming at the same time. So really nice kind of regulating type of breath. If you want to get more energy, then I would encourage to breathe more into the lower ribs part, not upward, but really outward, which helps. It signals our nervous system that we have more confidence, that we're more open, that we're willing to expose our heart. And that can actually boost your testosterone levels and like make you have like more risk-taking tendency or have more energy. So that could be a good one. If your morning is not that great, it's a power trip.
Yeah.
Then I would go more to, the lower part of your ribs, breathing with an expansion, feeling your ribs opening sideways rather than upward.
And these, how long, how many, how should we be doing this? Should we be sitting, lying?
It's easier to breathe lying down if you're beginning your journey, because when we breathe, we expand the torso.
Yeah.
And expanding the torso requires to also stabilize with our postural muscles. So when we're not used to it, lying down gives us more freedom for the breath. However, it's good to be like training to like be able to practice it upright, because if you're lying down, you might get I'm getting tired, let me have a nap.
Yep.
But for people beginning their breath journeys, I always prefer to put them on their backs. So that, their muscles don't have to get engaged to support their postures. Awesome. And in terms of timing, if you can do 2 minutes, it's better than nothing. Right? I like to have a 20 minutes breath practice in the morning. I think that starts my day so well. But if you have 2 minutes, 5 minutes, it's already enough, right? To just get started and build that habit of just having more awareness of how we're breathing.
What if you wake up and you're not feeling so great? So you wake up, you're feeling, let's maybe start with anxious. So you're worried about your day. What type of breath would be good to start then?
So when it comes to more stress responses, breathing in the belly is very valuable. The lower the breath towards the pelvic floor, the better it is. And the reason for that is our vagus nerve. I don't know if you heard of the vagus nerve. It's one of our cranial nerve. And most of the nerve fibers are sensory nerve for the vagus nerve. So it basically feeds our brain information about our internal feelings. So when we breathe in the belly, we are moving all of our digestive organs, faking that we're digesting and things are happening there. So the vagus nerve actually signals our brain that we're in a calm response. So if we're feeling stress, breathing in the belly can very quickly trigger a relaxation response. And if someone has anxiety, I would even add to count the breath, right? To not just breathe in the belly, but to count the breath, to bring really that focus to the present moment, because anxiety is about being in the future and like preempting potential danger. So when we come back to counting the breath, that can really ground us in the moment and then have the body get into that relaxation response. I want to put a really, really big warning there that we should not breathe deeply.
Okay.
Deep breathing is probably the worst thing someone with anxiety should do.
Okay.
And that's funny because we've all been told in our life, like, calm down, take a deep breath.
Take a deep breath, yeah.
And now we're starting to understand so much better that taking a deep breath is actually taking a lot of oxygen and can bring someone into a state of hyperventilation. Someone who suffers from chronic stress or anxiety already is constantly in that state of hyperventilation.
Yeah.
So taking a deep breath on top of that might make the oxygen actually not available. And then you feel like you cannot access your breath and you don't have enough air.
Yeah.
And it's actually, the key is to breathe less. So taking gentle but slow breath is so much better than deep breathing. Deep breathing is not that great.
Yeah, okay, because this is crazy, because people always been told, if you're like getting a bit emotional, you're feeling anxious or stressed, take that big deep breath. I'm just wondering now, like, there's been a couple of instances in my life where I've been in that state. I've tried to take deep breath and ended up having a panic attack where you feel like you just can't breathe. So it actually could have been the cause taking that big deep breath or taking a number of big deep breaths could have been the cause of the panic, could have triggered the panic attack.
Exactly. Because when you bring too much oxygen, when the oxygen is too high, carbon dioxide is too low, our internal environment makes it that the oxygen becomes unavailable. So you're loaded with oxygen, but your hemoglobin is holding on to it and it's not making it available to your cells. So it's like you don't have any air accessible.
Yeah.
And that sensation, it's like you're drowning, right?
Yeah.
So it triggers that panic attack, which makes you breathe even faster because now you're in a panic.
Yeah.
And that's why when people are hyperventilating, right, the classical is breathe in a paper bag.
Yeah.
It's actually to lower your oxygen level. So in these states, we should actually just lengthen the exhale as much as possible, or have like a short inhale and a really, really big sigh.
Okay.
And then that dismantles the panic attack because our internal environment goes back to the right pH, to the right saturation of oxygen.
Okay. This is amazing. Okay. So just coming back to that kind of belly breath. So if we're waking up, we're feeling a little bit anxious, in through the nose always, out through the mouth?
Best through the nose. In through the nose, out through the mouth could work. In through the nose, out through the nose as well.
Mm-hmm.
The difference when we breathe through the nose is that we have better gas exchanges in general. It humidifies, it warms up the air, it triggers more nitrate oxide, so which dilates our bronchi. So breathing through the nose increases the gas exchanges that happen in our lungs. So if I am calm, I want to breathe through my nose. If I am excited, if I am stressed, breathing through the nose, especially if I breathe deeply, might not be the best. So short in through the nose, long out through the mouth might work better.
Also, so I think I was listening to Huberman years ago, and I was struggling with getting stitches when I ran. And so he, one of his podcast episodes taught me about the physiological sigh. So the deep breath and then go a little bit further again and then let it all out. Yeah. And that helped. And I actually don't just use it now when I run. I sometimes use it, maybe when I'm feeling a bit like overwhelmed. Probably not the best one to use if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, right?
Actually, no. These big sighs are very regulating for people.
Yeah.
And when I speak about breath with my client, a lot of them will go, oh, that's why, like when I'm stressed, I often go, and I sigh. Yeah. Yes, that's our natural body wisdom to just like try to self-soothe, self-regulate, activate that parasympathetic response to kind of come down the overwhelm.
Yeah. Okay, amazing. And then I do box breathing. I do the box breathing when I tend to, maybe if I'm going for a walk and I just want to regulate, like I feel like something's off, like my nervous system's a bit off, like I will tend to do that. And I like the rhythm of it as well. So sometimes I'll find myself doing it, maybe not even consciously. I just find myself counting, but I'm a counter anyway. So I'm not one of these weird people that's like constantly counting. Any other types of breaths that can help us with like our nervous system?
One that I find really, really interesting, and the effect is subtle, but it's fascinating, is what the yogis call Nadi Shodhana, the alternate nostril breathing.
Yes.
I don't know if you heard or practiced this one. To me, what I find so fascinating about that is we don't know quite why, but throughout the day, we always have a dominant nostril, right? One nostril is more open than the other. When that nostril is open, the opposite side of our brain receives more blood flow. So the right part of our brain, which is what we call the feminine, right? The more making sense of things, learning, creative, is connected to our left nostril being more open. The right nostril, connected to the left side of our brain, is more in the masculine, the doing, the action. And this practice of Nadi Shodhana is to breathe in through a nostril and breathe out through the other, and then bounce the breath on the opposite side to basically balance both hemispheres of our brain, which is cool. But what I love to do is actually to just force the breath in just one nostril. For example, I have to study, right? When I was doing my degree, and my right nostril would be open, and I had to power through so many medical terms, right? I would actually force my left nostril open by kind of squeezing the right side of my ribs, either with a bolster or squeezing a ball, and breathing through the left.
And then did you block the right?
I did not even need to block the right. We can lie on a roll towel on our side to open the opposite side of our ribs, and it takes a couple of minutes, and it opens the top nostril, right? It's so fascinating how we have access to all of these tools. We can override our nervous system and direct it the way we want if we just understand what we need.
I cannot. I've never in my life, and I studied pranayama when I was training to be a yoga teacher, but I have never in my life heard that if you could lie on your side, put a bolster under your ribs, it's going to open the opposite nostril.
Yeah.
That is amazing. I'm going to go
squeezing a tennis ball as well on the side you want to close. It hasn't worked for me, so maybe it works for other people.
Yeah,
but bolsters works really well, or roll towel.
Yeah. Okay, amazing. Right, I'm going to try that tonight. So when you get a cold and one nostril always seems to be worse than the other, right? You can't breathe out of one. If you practice it, then could that do it? Then
it could open it. Yeah. But if you have a cold, then no, right?
Yeah.
When we're sick, when we're congested, then we have to accept that we're going to breathe through the mouth, and that's okay.
Maybe let's talk a little bit about pranayama and some of the wisdom that is there that we can bring into our everyday lives as well. Can we talk maybe a little bit about some of the different breaths?
Well, pranayama is part of yoga, right?
Yeah.
And what people don't always understand is that the goal of yoga is to quiet your mind. The reason we move, the reason we breathe is actually to quiet our mind. And the pranayama techniques in yoga are really about balancing your emotions, balancing your mood so that it doesn't become a distraction for your mind. So the purpose of pranayama is to, it says in the sutras, to lift that veil of confusion, of distraction that we may have. So certain pranayama techniques will be to address the body. For example, the yogis in the Himalayas working on glaciers, they have a lot of pranayama techniques that are about warming the body, which I use every time I go back home in the winter in Canada. I would do half an hour of Kapalabhati, which is what people know as breath of fire, which increases our internal temperature by bringing more blood flow to the vital organs. Yeah. So this one is that fast exhale through the nose, pumping the belly in as we exhale. We also have the opposite, the Shitali, where we're going to curl the tongue and cool down our body temperature. So these four are more physical. And then we have the more, to balance our emotion, like the 3-part breath that I mentioned earlier, box breathing, Nadi Shodhana, about regulating our nervous system, and other practices that we call the vayus, and it's a bit complicated to get into that, but they're really about this section of our of our breath, and how these sections create different effects. So if I need more grounding, for example, if I feel scattered, I'm going to breathe down into my pelvic floor and really push the breath down like I'm breathing into my legs, and that bring that strong, like I am here. When I feel heavy, I'm going to be breathe up into my head, into Udana Vayu, where that's elongating the spine, bringing more like openness and confidence. Yeah. So the yogis figured it out, that we can really use the breath to just shift our state. And if we use these tools today where life is so demanding, to know like, oh, I'm getting out of balance now, how can my breath bring me back? Then we can stay within our capacity, not get overwhelmed because we catch ourselves like, okay, which breath I need right now.
I love it, honestly. And then I think now I just want to talk maybe like, let's go into the breathing for an altered state. Because I think that's, when the term breathwork gets thrown around, which it does a lot at the moment, I think that's where people go with it. People are always sharing their trippy experiences. But it's really good that we've kind of covered that kind of breathing for every day, and, the yogic breathing, because I think it's really important as well. Tell us a little bit about kind of breathing to enter an altered state and what that actually means.
So all these breathing for altered states, right? They use a controlled state of hyperventilation. Most of them fall under the category of circular breathing, right? Which is a pauseless breath that the drop in carbon dioxide in our blood, as well as the repetitive movement, brings us into this altered state. That is truly comparable to psychedelic therapy. And there was a research that I recently read that was comparing the same type of dissolution, feeling of bliss that you would see with psychedelics. So these types of breath work, and there's many, many ways of working with these altered states, will have a very different purpose than what we were just talking about, the pranayama. To me, pranayama is putting a Band-Aid, right? I'm out of balance. How can I fix it temporarily? Because right now I need to calm down, or right now I need to energize. But that requires me to redo it every time I get into this state of out of balance. To me, when we work with conscious connected breathing, with the circular breath work, and we do it in a way that is nervous system aware, that is safe, that creates a safe space, what it allows us to unlock is to go to the why am I getting overwhelmed? Why am I down in my energy? Because this is about our capacity to welcome life. This is about the way we interact with life. And all of that is coded in our subconscious and unconscious mind. So circular breathwork allows us to go into the material of the subconscious and unconscious and unpack some of that. That's why it is used in PTSD and trauma work. That's why it is used for people who feel like they're stuck, they need to release some emotions. I've even used it to help people who had like misalignment physiologically. And yeah, it allows us to go to the root cause of things. But again, to me, it requires a safe environment, because going to the root cause is not like I'm going to unpack everything in one go and then be healed. That's not how healing works, right? It's about getting layer after layer, and every time create more safety and more capacity for a nervous system.
Maybe before I kind of go into all my different questions about the different types of, because there's a lot of different types, kind of Wim Hof and 9D breathwork and all of these other kind of, I don't know, branded probably breathwork classes or I don't know what would you call them?
Modalities.
Yeah, modalities. Yeah, that's the right word. Could you maybe just take us through yours and through what it looks like when you hold space for a breathwork class, what the process is, what people would normally go through, and what people maybe should expect at different points.
The way I always start my session is by establishing a relationship and a sense of safety in the space that I hold. So we'll spend a little bit of time talking about the journey itself, how it can unfold, getting comfortable in the space, building that trust. Because as we go into these states, there's really a sense of vulnerability. And to allow ourselves to be vulnerable, first we need to establish that safety. So for me, this is paramount. And that will take about a third of the time that I spend on a session to establish that trust, that safety, so that people can really drop in. And then the journey itself, I will guide verbally and then use music, sometimes use instruments, sometimes use smell to go into more activation through the breath. So people start with their circular breath, and the music will influence different breath. Now, the way I work with conscious connected breathing is, I always say, at the extreme part of somatic. A lot of breath work will force specific breath pattern, like belly, chest, belly, chest. I've noticed after years of practice and thousands of people in my spaces that if I just let their body breathe the way it wants to breathe, I get so much more. I get so much more subtleties in their journey. I get so much more variety of experiences. So my evolution in breathwork has been to really just step back and be a witness, be a curious witness, and let people just keep their breath circular, but let their nervous system actually show me what they need. And I use a lot of body work as an osteopath. And so during the journey, I will help direct the breath if I see that there's a restriction in the ribs or tension in the diaphragm, or there's a certain breath pattern that shows avoidance to go into something. Then just with curiosity again, just going into that exploration through body work or through affirmation. So the journey builds up into more activation, more power, until we reach kind of a peak. And based on who's in the space, on how the journey is unfolding, I'll change the music, I'll keep the peak longer or shorter. And then we drop into a really, really long integration and relaxation. And during that time, people just go back to their very, very normal, calm breath. There's barely any breath happening normally at that time. And that part of the journey is about having your nervous system go back to complete safety. So that whole process actually follows what is called the stress cycle, a healthy stress cycle. A healthy stress cycle is, I'm safe, I'm socially engaged, everything goes well. I'm in my parasympathetic state. And then there's a threat, right? That threat, there's not a real threat in breathwork, but that activation can bring up events of the past or memories or things that are troubling. So when we have that threat or trigger, we have the mobilization of our resource. And then there's a discharge of mobilized energy in the sense of, I'm going to run away, or I'm going to fight, or I'm going to scream, or I'm going to have emotion. And after that discharge, I go back to safety. That's a healthy stress cycle, right? Unhealthy stress cycle is, I am socially engaged, there's a trigger, I mobilize my energy, I'm not in a safe environment to discharge that, right? So I'm going to just trap it inside so the body remembers. Or I don't have the space to go back to safety if I'm in a toxic home environment or in a war zone or anything, right? Any toxic environment does not allow us to complete that cycle. So my breathwork journey actually reproduces a healthy stress cycle so that whatever arises through the subconscious, which might be things of the past that are like written in our subconscious, can then be completed. And as they get completed, it's like, okay, the loop is closed. That trigger is no longer recorded in my body. And that's why breathwork can be so powerful.
As someone who went through that with you on Friday, I'm going to share a little bit about my experience, actually, because I've got a couple of questions about a couple of the points. So this wasn't my first breathwork session. I think it was my third one with you, maybe third or fourth. And before working with you, I had done a 9D breathwork class. But I didn't have the best experience with the 9D breathwork class. I think I didn't really fully know what I was getting myself in for. I breathed quite far too deeply. And at one point, I'm pretty sure I blacked out. And it's pretty hard to know if you did or didn't, because you're all lying on the floor. You've got a blanket on, you've got an eye mask on, you've got headphones on. But quite quickly into the breathwork session, I had locked fingers, and but there was this period after hitting the peak that I've got nothing, you know. Everything just kind of went black for me. And then when I came to, I just felt like awful. like really, really bad. I felt like I was on the worst calm down of my whole life. Like I felt sick and shaky and just really not good. Maybe this is, just to clarify, not a breathwork session that I did with you. This is someone else. And this was my first experience of breathwork. And I didn't do it again for another 6 months until I met you in Bali. What happened there? What could have happened there?
Thank you. What could have happened there, and I see that often in these very pushy type of breath work, is there's a hierarchy to our sympathetic response. Fight, flight, freeze, right? Based on the level of activation, based on the size of the threat. To me, what I hear is that your nervous system went so overwhelmed that you went into a freeze response. Complete dissociation. This is too much. I cannot feel that. Let me black out. And then I'll come back, right? Now, that can be handled in a nice way if that happens. Where, if you look at how an animal would go into a freeze response, right? They'll shake after. There's going to be that discharge that still happens, and there's the return to safety. So the blacking out, while it's not ideal, to me, it's just a really big red flag that it was pushed too far for your capacity on that day at that time. Still could be recovered if you let the discharge happen and you bring safety. Safety requires co-regulation, requires self-regulation. So when we look at big group breath work of 50 people in a room with one facilitator, that co-regulation rarely happens. It's like, okay, like you guys had a big journey, you scream, and now you go home. There is a lot of value for certain people to go into these big peak experiences. For someone who's looking to regulate their nervous system, that wouldn't be the path, right? And you did not have a good experience. It doesn't mean that this breath work is bad. It just means that this was not for your capacity on that day.
Yeah.
And I wish more breathwork facilitator had a better awareness of nervous system regulation so that these experiences, if they happen, they can be brought back to, well, let's get something positive out of this, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's it. I think, look, it was January, it was after Christmas, it was heading into the new year, wanting to try something new versus, 6 months later, I was on a solo trip on my own, just to try and kind of heal after like a big year. And I met you in Bali and we had like a one-on-one session and I had like a completely different experience. But I think because of the first one and because of my type A personality, I'm a little bit of a control freak. A little bit in underestimation. But it's like I really want to like control it's really hard for me to like let go and control. And on Friday is, I think I said to you, I want to go a little bit deeper today. I'm seeking answers on something. But I still notice, when doing my circular breathing, I'm still trying to control. I'm still thinking about what's happening. Why is that? Like, and how can I stop doing that?
That's a fair question. And I went through the same, right?
Yeah.
I think we have similar personalities. And it took me a while to actually just welcome like full surrender to my breath. And again, it was just about creating that safety within myself, right? And we can push through it and make it something that is unpleasant and then reinforces the pattern that it's unsafe to surrender. Or we can do a little bit of tethering, right?
Yeah.
To pendulum into like, let me touch into discomfort, expand my capacity to show my nervous system that this is safe, this is uncomfortable, but this is still safe. And then that becomes like, okay, up till there is safe. And then next time, and next time, maybe we'll push it till here. And I like this little doodle that I saw one day that was so cool. It was about, not going out of your comfort zone, but expanding your comfort zone. And to me, the way I want to work with breathwork is this way, right? So every time you do it, you get a new experience and you get a new positive reinforcement that it is safe to go there, right?
Yeah.
So you're training your nervous system to allow more surrender, to allow more trust, because this control freak response that we have, this need to control environment, I hate using this word, but it's a trauma response, right? Mm-hmm. It is a way that we want to reassure ourselves that we're going to be safe by controlling what is happening, by controlling what we can control at least. So, yeah, it does take time to dismantle that response that has kept us safe for decades of our life, right?
Yeah. And it's that, is it? It's like I'm trying to control the experience, but I'm also trying to thinking about my breath. Am I doing it right? And everything else. Mm-hmm. But at one point you came over, you put your hand on my chest and you told me to take a deep breath in and hold my breath. I don't know how long that was for, but I was like trying to explain to people on Saturday over lunch. Why I was like, I think it was about 4 minutes, but I don't know. It felt like an extremely long time.
Yeah.
That I was able to hold my breath. I think if you told me to hold my breath now, I wouldn't be able to hold it for that long, for as long as I did. And then once I was, and I think you said to me, and you might not have said this, I imagine this, your body will let you know when it's time to breathe again. And so I tried to just let go, stop thinking about the breath, and I was still holding it. And then that's kind of when I then slipped into an altered state. How long was I? Yeah, you'll probably be like, oh, you only hold it for 30 seconds.
No, it was, and because you have a good breath capacity, right? I want to put that warning, do not out there hold your breath like that. It was about 2 to 2.5 minutes. Yeah. So it's a really, really long breath hold. And it was towards the end of our session, right? Yeah. So what happened is after we create that controlled hyperventilation, doing breath work, this big shift in our blood gases actually creates a DMT release in the brain. And that's where people can get altered state. I personally don't use breath hold as a default in my session. I need to know my breathers. I need to know their capacity. And I need to see that this is what they need to drop in something based on what I witness in their breath. So in my session, I'll never go like, okay, everyone take a deep breath in and hold your breath. And we hold it for 30 seconds or 60 seconds. Yeah. I'll do that one-on-one. First, for safety. Second, because if you have a group, it's not appropriate for everyone. Not everyone is there in their journey. So I don't like to force, like, okay, now it's time to scream. Now it's time to hold your breath. I really want that individualized experience. I remember in my own journeys that I did with other modalities, like, okay, now scream. It's like, this is really not what I need right now. Yeah. I'm floating with the angels in other spaces. I don't want to scream. This is not serving me. So yeah, that breath hold, I think it's something that has to be used in moderation when it's appropriate. And in your brain, it creates a DMT release. So it's this really, really big high.
Okay, I was about to say, what's DMT release?
Okay. Yeah. So DMT is apparently, when people die and their life flashes in front of their eyes, that's a DMT release. DMT is also used as a drug for people to have these high. Well, guess what? You don't need to take anything. You just need to get in your breath. And you don't even need to have the breath hold, right? Circular breathing can create that as well if your breath is like in good capacity.
Okay, I'm going to tell people what I saw, because again, I was trying to kind of explain this to my friends at lunch, and I got a few eye rolls. So I went in, and it was almost like it wasn't a very visual experience, whereas sometimes it has been quite a visual experience. It was almost cloudy, but there was a patch of light, and the light was moving like around a little bit. And I sensed that the light was my Nana, who passed earlier this year. And she is, I'm going to try not to cry now, but she is We were incredibly close. We've got a really small family. You know, there's my mum, my dad, my sister, my auntie. You know, that's it. Okay, aside from husbands and kids, you know, we're a really close family, and you know, and this isn't the first time that I've been in an altered state and she's come to me, and whether that's like my subconscious needing that reassurance, and that's, or whether there is a spiritual element and she came to me, I think, you know, let's leave that open. She told me to be kinder to my mum, which, yeah, I know. Okay. She I said thank you for a gift that she's given to my sister, and you know, she was, I asked if her partner was there with her. She said yes and no, not in a way that you would be able to understand. I asked her for clarity on something that I'm just working through with my personal brand, and trying to figure out the evolution of this podcast and how it is going to complement my new role. And she, you know, she was like, you've got the answers inside you. You've always had the answers. And I said, yeah, I know, but I'm struggling to pull this all together. And it came to me. The answer came to me like clear as anything. And I got upset then, because I just was like, I miss you. I just want to give you a big hug. Like, I just want my Nana hug. And I think I just kind of remember like feeling the tears streaming down my face when I was in the session, but I was still kind of lying back and still in that state. And then, you know, the light faded, you know, and then I'm kind of coming back, and my breath had obviously then started to kind of come back, and then we were kind of lying down in a Savasana kind of meditative state. So that was kind of my experience on Friday, which
thank you.
I wasn't expecting to see or feel my Nana. But what I did go in there was with an intention to get some clarity on this thing that I've been thinking about a lot, kind of around my personal brand. And I walked out of that session with that. Now, I know not all sessions are going to give you what you want. And so there was that part of me that I had the intention to get clarity, but also I was also like, you know, I just do want to be able to let go and see where the experience takes me. Is that quite a normal, would you say, like me telling you this back, is that quite a normal experience?
It is a common type of experience. It's among what I do see often in terms of receiving messages of clarity or connecting with dear ones that are gone. And just like you said, right?
Yeah.
Is it the part of them that's within you, or is it out there? We don't need to know, right? That experience is so profound and so healing. The number of experiences is so varied, but what you shared is among, the possibilities are actually really, really common.
What type of other things have you seen? Obviously respecting like patient.
Absolutely. And I'm going to stay very vague and never name anyone. Confidentiality is so important to me, and it's part of the trust, right? Yeah. There's more physiological experiences. For example, someone who had an accident and the body holds a physical trauma that has not been fully released, that can come alive in body movement or reliving the event. In my introduction, I often talk about a C-section, right? The C-section physiological trauma. And I've had women reenacting their birth experience, because birth experiences are not always the way you want them to be, and they're not as pleasant, and the body can hold part of that experience that's not completed. So physically, I've had a lot of women like reliving the full birth and going into body movement. For me, I had a knee surgery, right? Surgery, when you're under, the body feels it, the brain doesn't, or vice versa. So it is a trauma for the body. So working with that scar tissues, working with this can be very powerful. Then you have more the emotional part of it. Sometimes it's about tapping an emotion that is unsafe. For example, my very, very first breathwork experience, and why I was like, I want to train into that. I experienced joy, right? I was really in control, as you mentioned. It's like, am I doing it right? Why is nothing happening? And then I just started experiencing this joy and laughing. And then I was like, wow, I have cut joy out of my life for so many years. And then feeling the sorrow and the grief of all the joy that I've like pushed away in my life. And from then on, like joy was welcome again, right? Or anger, or like things that we don't allow ourselves to feel because of the way we've been raised. I was not safe to express, or because it's been repressed. And to let the breath guide you and to feel these things, because the more you can feel life, the more you can welcome life. Or sometimes it's about releasing an emotion that we haven't had the space to release and discharge, and the sadness of an event or the anger of an event, and let that come out of where it's trapped in the body. And we can have very profound experiences of reliving events of the past that feel incomplete. One that come to mind, years ago, I had this client that had a very difficult, abusive relationship with a parent, and she went back to her childhood home and entered the house and faced her dad, and then closed the house door and then walked away. And this was such a healing experience for that woman to like close that chapter with forgiveness. So breath allows, I know the shares that I hear every time is, yeah, I do have goosebumps too. And I often end a journey with tears in my eyes, hearing what people go through, because I'm just a witness of their breath, right? What's going within, I have no idea. I'm just there to see the breath, interpret the breath, see how I can guide the breath where there's resistance, where there's avoidance. And then what I hear after is mind-blowing. And every journey is completely different. Yeah. And mine have been completely different. I've received such profound messages that almost feel like divine guidance, right? Or reminders. And yeah, just so much expansion that comes from that, from living that, from feeling safe in going into these spaces, and then translating that into our daily life.
What advice would you give to somebody who is looking, or who'd be interested in trying this type of breath work?
I would recommend to seek a well-trained facilitator, not someone who will promote trauma healing and like this trauma marketing to me is a really big red flag, that it's about creating catharsis and not about integration. So doing a little bit of research on the background of the facilitator, how the space is held, is important. And then going into that is to be ready to receive anything, right? Our bodies are super resilient. Yeah. Our nervous system is very resilient. So it's about trusting, right?
Yeah. Amazing. And just finally, could you just tell us a little bit about your story as well? Like how you mentioned, it was the joy, the joy of your first experience that led you to this. But even before then, maybe just kind of briefly your story and where you are now as well.
So I do come from the corporate space. I've had a decade of corporate career that was extremely exciting. I had a global strategy role and for a Fortune 50 company, which was really, really fun. And I loved it. And my health was very sacrificed through that because I was on such a power high. And And on the sidelines, with my mental health going up and down, I was doing yoga. And yoga would always bring me back to balance. So I became curious about understanding why, because as a control freak, I want to understand why. So I started studying yoga therapy just out of curiosity. And it really opened a whole universe to me. And that universe was to witness how, I'm going to generalize here, how everyone lives with some form of chronic pain, whether it's physical chronic pain, whether it's psychological distress, whether it's emotional distress. And we've come to normalize it. We've come to normalize that it's normal to have a headache 3 times a week, or that it's normal to have insomnia, or it's normal to have anxiety if you have a stress. It's not. This is not how our bodies are designed. So it became kind of a life mission to start bringing more awareness of that. And eventually I met an osteopath. And her understanding of the connection, mind, body, emotion was so mind-blowing. I was like, I want to be like that woman. So I started my PhD in osteopathy, just left my career behind. It was time. I had done what I needed to do and just wanted to understand. No intention of becoming a yoga teacher, not even an intention of becoming an osteopath. I was on a mission to understand how it's all connected and how I can help people stepping out of pain, right? So I studied osteopathy. I moved to Bali, and there was still a missing piece. And osteopathy is a wonderful modality where we're supposed to understand the holistic view on health. But in practicality, this is not what I got out of it. So there was still that missing piece connecting the body and the emotion that I could not pinpoint. And then breathwork came into my life and I was like, this is it. And now within my osteopathy practice, I work a lot with the breath to help people correct posture, because if your emotions are a certain way, if you're stressed, right, that's going to affect your breath. Breath is through the muscles. So that's going to start tensing the shoulders, rolling the shoulders forward. It's going to start creating restriction, constriction, upper back pain, headaches, tension in your dura. So I can fix the muscles. They're going to spring back because the emotion is still there. So it became that really fascinating journey of understanding how breath is the access to our emotions. Emotions impact our posture. How can I fix the breath? How can I allow the breath to be more expansive, more free, more varied, more dynamic, so that people's posture can also be more expansive, more dynamic? And that's been my journey, to just work out of passion and fascination for the human experience.
Amazing. Oh, I love it. And we can find you in Bali. And you come up to Singapore?
I come up to Singapore every couple of months. Yeah. And in the Middle East, a couple of times a year as well. I love to work in big cities where I come from and where I know that this work is needed, as we were saying earlier.
Yeah, definitely. And as amazing as Bali is, I'm sure it's quite nice to escape every now and then. Oh, Marylene, I feel like we could keep going. There's so much wisdom in here. Thank you so much for sharing today. I've learned so much more, and I'm just so grateful. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, and opening this space for bringing a little more awareness to this tool that is free and available and so easy to tap into if we just take a moment to notice.
So powerful. And I think for me, I just, doing breathwork classes with you every couple of months, just really, I do find it an amazing tool for me to really kind of just figure out what's going on, whether that's tackling some limiting beliefs, getting clarity on something, or just letting go and seeing what comes up, just trying to get a little bit of more understanding of maybe what's going on that I'm not consciously aware of. So it's incredible. But what today's conversation has brought to me is like, I need to do more breath work day to day. I need to be more conscious of my breath. I know this and I feel the impact, but I need to make it more part of my routine, I think. But thank you so much. And to everyone listening, I'm going to link to all of Marylene's profiles and links and everything below. Please get in touch, and anyone out there, drop me a message if you want to come next time she's in town. Anyone based in Singapore, come along. I think the next one with you will be in June. End of June. Yeah, I'll link to them below as well, so you can check out the dates. And yeah, thank you so much for listening. I hope this was helpful, and I would love to hear from you in the comments. But yeah, I hope you have a lovely day, and I'll see you soon. Bye.